What's up, everybody? Welcome to Podcast Now. I'm Alex. In this video, I want to predict the PS5 price. Now, we've talked a lot about the PS5 in past videos over the last couple months. I thought that now was about time to actually lay down my predictions, kind of go over again what we know, what maybe Sony's strategy is in regards to the PS5, but then ultimately give our laydown, give our prediction of whatever this price is going to be. In my opinion, I want to jump kind of right to the end. It's either, in my opinion, it's either going to be $450, and these are all, I guess, U.S. currency, $450 or $500. So $449.99 or $499.99. I think it's either going to be one of those. Now, what complicates things is if the rumor of the PS5 and PS5 Pro are true. If that is a true thing, that definitely throws like a wrench into things. I don't want to think about it, mainly because I don't believe that that's going to happen. We had that discussion. People were kind of mad. Some people are kind of mad. I don't really get the hate or hysteria about it. I think that it just doesn't make sense, but we already talked about that in a past video. But I don't want to really consider that, although that is something that, hey, look, if it is real, then yes, that does affect it, right? Because then I would imagine PS5 Pro is $550, $600, but then what's the PS5? Is the PS5 $500 still, or is it $450, or is it $400? Is it something like insane like that? The PS5 Pro definitely is like a major problem to things, but I really do think if there's none, if there is no, and even I guess if there is a PS5 Pro, I think the PS5 is going to land somewhere between $450 and $500. Now, we know even internally, we've talked about this in a lot of different videos, we've been talking about PlayStation 5 news quite a bit, is that it seems like they are willing, and Sony has said, people inside Sony, rumor has it, they've said that they're willing to take a hit this time around. So when the PS4 released, they actually made money. They made around $25 per unit every time they sold one at launch. Now, that normally does not happen. Normally, you sell units for a loss. In fact, that's what a lot of them normally do. You make your money through the games, through like the first-party games, through games in general, because they all have to give you a slice of it, whether it's on the PlayStation Store, whether it's through, even if you go into GameStop and you buy a game physically, still some of it, a small percentage, but a percentage for sure goes to Sony. So that's how they make their money. They make their money through PlayStation Plus, stuff like that. That's where the real money makers are. So they are willing to, in this case, lose money, because I believe the production costs for PS5s are around $470. So they'd be losing $20, $25 every single time. Whereas, again, last time PS4, they would have made $20, $25 per unit. So they'd be losing. And you got to think, well, okay, $20, $25 for a mega corporation isn't that bad. Yeah, it's not bad. But now multiply that by 7 million, 8 million units that you're going to sell in the period, the first month that unit comes out. Okay, automatically, that is a lot of money, right? So you got to think about that. But again, they're willing to do it. They don't necessarily want to. I mean, they would prefer to make money, and that's where the 500 comes in, because if they sell it for 500, they would in fact make money again. The biggest thing, we even talked about this on my second channel, the biggest thing is Microsoft. And I mean, it's kind of obvious, right? Is your biggest competitor. Now, while Microsoft doesn't see Sony or Nintendo as a competitor at all, and for some reason they view Google as their competitor, which makes no sense, for Sony's perspective, Microsoft is that competitor, and it couldn't be more clear. And again, we made this video on my second channel. It couldn't be more clear that Sony is waiting and wants. Like, everybody knows it, and I don't think it's never been officially said by Sony, right? But everybody knows, hey, Sony would prefer to go second. They are able to fluctuate the prices. They are able to say Microsoft goes at $450. Sony's able to at least match it. Sony's able to say, okay, they're going to go $450, we'll go $450. Right? We were going to go $5, but you know what? We'll take the hit, because we can't show up like a week after Xbox Series X. We can't show up $50 more, especially if maybe some of their specs are more powerful, stuff like that. So they just can't have it. So while, and that's a totally different discussion, right? Like, which one goes first? It actually is a big problem, because you see Sony waiting. And again, we've talked about their strategy. We've talked about that. It's, for where they are, their position, it's a solid strategy, and there's nothing that wrong with it. And they generate so much hype and attention when they do just the smallest of things, which is obviously a very, very good thing. But you have them sitting and waiting, which is fine, but eventually you need to go. And considering you're not going to E3, yeah, you'll have maybe a state of play, but right now, Xbox Series X continues to get information, right? And we've had that kind of discussion before, right? Series X continues to get information. PS5 has none. So when you first announce the PS5, like when you show the console, do you say the price? Do you say the release date? Or late April, let's say, do you just show the console, show the controller, and that's it? And maybe you talk about some games you have in the works for it, but that's all you do. And then you still wait until Microsoft goes at E3, and then maybe like a week later, you go and you say your stuff, and you could, again, hope to beat it or match it at the very worst, right? Could that be their strategy? I honestly feel like that is their strategy. There's really nothing else they can do to try and stay second in terms of like they want Microsoft to go first and then they talk second. But I really feel like Microsoft has done a really good job so far leading into the Series X at communicating, at just making better overall decisions than were made when it went to the Xbox One, right? Because that was a pure disaster leading into it. They've definitely done a better job. They're still fighting from behind, but they're definitely doing a much better job. And why do I say that? It's because I truly do feel like Microsoft, like in the same thing, Series X is either going to be 450 or 5, and I want to believe that Microsoft really is going to shoot for 450. I truly, if I had to lay a prediction, if you had to force me, which is what this video kind of is, but if you were literally forcing me, like I had to say it, I truly do think Microsoft wants it to be 450. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 500. I also wouldn't be surprised, but that's the tough thing, right? Because if you only expect two things and it's one of the two, then obviously you expected it. But I think Microsoft is going to land at 450, and that would lead Sony to, I think, doing the same thing. I really don't think Sony can go to 500. I mean, even this, here's the other wrinkle, is if Microsoft says, you know what, we just can't do it. We need to make money this time around because we've really loved. But yet again, have they lost because Games Pass is doing so well, stuff like that. But say, whatever their logic is, say they end up landing on, hey, we just cannot sell this at a loss. And maybe it really could, because we don't really know. I haven't seen any articles talking about production costs for the Series X. Maybe they say, hey, we cannot go lower than 5. It's got to be 500. Does Sony then still go 500 to match, or do they really go and say, you know what? We can nail the finishing blow here. We destroyed them last generation. We can land it here. We can say, hey, we're going to take a loss. We're still going to lose $20, $25 per unit. But you know what? We're going to come in $50 less, and we have all these exclusives and all this kind of stuff, and we're just going to steal it again right away when we launch. And so do they go 450 anyway? So in a prediction like this, talking about the PS5, I think 450 is that sweet spot. I think, especially when you look at last generation, and yeah, they fluctuate, and inflation too, you got to think of. Most times, Sony's consoles, adjusted for inflation, normally end up around that $500 mark, even the $400 PS4 with inflation is like, I think, 460, 470, so it's even closer. It is close to 500. So you think about that. I still think, though, that they're going to try and shoot for 450. I would say I wouldn't be shocked if it's 500, but I would be mildly surprised, I guess I should say, right? Because I really do think when they announce it, or whenever they show like that ending screen, right, that says that price point, in my mind, right now, I'll tell you, I mean, brutally honestly, I'm expecting to see 450. If it's 500, it's like, all right, well, that's $50 more than, and then with taxes, right? But that's $50 more than I expected. It's not so much of a huge burden to me, someone who knows he's getting it day one and is going to pre-order it, and $50 isn't the end of the world. But again, from a larger consumer perspective, from all the business perspectives, I mean, the $50 is a massive deal. Like, there's no doubt. I'm not arguing against that. I'm not saying that it isn't too much, or I'm not trying to defend them or anything. But I would say I'm expecting 450. There's been a lot of talk inside of Sony that seems to be what they're willing to go down. I mean, here's what I will say, because some people still are saying 400 or 425. Firstly, I don't think it would ever be in those quarter regions. It would never be 25 or 75. And secondly, I just 100% don't think they can get it down to 400. Okay, again, production cost is going to be 470, and that's with them taking some stuff out. They had to remove some stuff. Remember, they had to remove some stuff from the DualShock 5 as well. They had to take a lot of stuff out. I really don't think there's any possible way for it to be $400 again, because that would be like if they lost $70 per unit. Imagine, I mean, that is a massive. There's a difference between losing $25 each time. It's like, all right, well, again, you multiply that across 5, 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 million units, that is a lot of money you're losing. But now, and that is a lot, but it's not as much, especially considering now, okay, now you say $70. Now it's 70, maybe $75 a unit, and then you go from there. That is a huge deal. And let me tell you, if it's 400, I will do a somersault. I will jump over my balcony. That's what I'll do for you, and I'll record it, because there's zero way that is actually happening. I really just don't think they would take that much of a loss. And to be honest with you, I don't really think there's a reason to, because even if Series X is 450, I think you'd be content to just match it. You wouldn't have to go lower than it, right? I mean, I guess, yeah, if Series X is 450 and then PS5 is 400, that is a big deal. But I think that would actually crush Sony, and they wouldn't want to do that. So I think they would settle for, well, we'll just match it, because matching it's fine, and we're both 450. We'll just try and release maybe a week earlier, or at least on the same day, or something like that, right? To try and gain the edge that way. I don't think they would go even further down in price. So guys, let me know in the comments below. What do you think? What do you think the price of the PS5 is ultimately going to be when it happens? Let me know. Make sure you guys subscribe to our YouTube channel, podcast. Now hit the bell icon so you guys know when these videos go up. And thank you so much for watching. We talk about PlayStation 5 news quite often on this channel, so make sure you guys are constantly checking back. And when this thing finally gets announced and revealed, we will absolutely be covering it here as well. Okay, thank you all so much for watching. I'll see you all in the next video.